We know that internet shopping, the use of online for shopping, is now an established habit. Recent survey evidence shows that 40% of people use the internet to shop and 47% to browse for goods online. So it's a pretty well-entrenched habit. It happens across all age cohorts. Men do it more than women do. I'm not brave enough to venture why, but they do. And it is also more of a habit among high earners than low-income groups. So this is already happening on a very wide scale, but in a European context, it isn't happening evenly. In fact, it's happening currently very unevenly. If we look here at the pattern of browsing and purchasing in different parts of Europe, we see, perhaps not surprisingly, the bigger Nordic and mature Western European markets, Sweden, Britain, Germany, France. The penetration of online retailing is much better established than it is in much of CEE and Southern Europe. But we also know from more recent survey evidence that something like 40% of retailers are actively looking to expand the geographic reach of their online offer. So that's not a static picture by any means. It's a very dynamic one. And what are retailers doing in this area? How are they actively pursuing multi-channel? Well, we know that they are. Retailers expect the proportion of their sales ordered online to double roughly over the next couple of years. And who knows how high that number might go beyond the next couple of years. So raising certainty that it will increase, and there are good, credible estimates that online retailing in Europe will grow by something between 12 and 15% per annum over the next few years, more in emerging markets. What does that mean for delivery channels, and what might that mean for logistics? Our survey evidence suggests that 70% of retailers currently see themselves primarily as traditional bricks and mortar retailers, but that almost 2/3 expect to become fully integrated multi-channel retailers over the next 2 years. That's a very, very significant shift. In tandem with that, 60% fully expect to need more shop space across their network over the next 2 years. So it isn't a cannibalization of business from one channel to another, but it may involve the role of the store changing, with implications again for distribution, as we'll see in a minute. What do logistics buildings designed to service and accommodate the needs of online retailing need to offer as distinct from the existing platform and existing traditional warehouses?
Si vous voulez, notre base logistique, quand nous avons fait...
Well, our logistics base, when we built the last 2 stores for warehouses for our company, we did custom built. We thought we had a 10-year plan. We had a space reserved for e-commerce, and our turnover, and we separated things into turnover export and turnover for e-commerce. But we have a problem, in fact, when we're talking about warehousing, is that our relay warehouses in the town centres, at the moment we have considerations of ecology. And so we have complications arising with, we are trying to get small warehousing in town to where we can organize our deliveries. For instance, we work with Monoprix, which brings the products up to the centre of Paris by train, and then there's distribution from that point. So it's very difficult now to access town centres, and so we have had to think about the way we can adapt our delivery to the access of town centre, because we have a proximity service, shoes and clothing. So to come back to your question, we do custom-built warehousing and but it's far more complicated to find square meterage in town centres. Of course, not the same price as being out of town. And that is the real problem that we have at the moment, finding real estate in town centres.
One of the things which is driving online retail and which will have a direct impact on property and logistics infrastructure is the relentless demand of the customer. So in the UK, it is truly multi-channel, and a lot of retailers are developing what they call collect your wave. So you can have it delivered to your home, you can collect it from the local corner shop, you can collect it from a petrol station, you can collect it from the shop itself, you can get it delivered to where you are at work. And one retail group called Aurora, a few weeks ago, announced a service offer which said that you place your order, we'll deliver it to you within 60 minutes. So does it mean that there is more property required? I don't know yet, and I think the decision-making horizon is very close at the moment. A, because the economy is in a dreadful state, and secondly, nobody can read where e-commerce is going at the moment. We know it's up, but we don't know how long it's going to be up for. And what we've got is an environment where people have been shocked by assumptions that things will remain the same. So there will be a different property requirement, there will be more property requirement, and there'll be a reconfiguration of what property people are sitting on.
We tend to believe that it leads to incremental demand. And as was discussed before, it does have impact on how companies organize their supply chains and how they reconfigure their supply chains continuously. So we view it as something very positive. What we have done in terms of report, we looked not only at what it means in terms of demand driver, but what effect does it have, and what effect could it have on allocation and asset requirements. So we interviewed a number of e-commerce occupiers, both e-tailers as well as the bricks and clicks, and we looked at what effect could that have on asset requirements and going forward. And as was discussed before as well, we also looked at the US and discussed with the US colleagues, what do we see in the US? If we take the US as a leading example, what trends do we see there and what could happen in Europe going forward? Maybe just quickly in terms of location requirements, of course, the differences in Europe are enormous. You know, countries don't move in the same property cycle. Cycles are different, they move at different speeds. So the e-commerce market is very diverse, so the trends we have seen in Europe are also very different country by country. But overall, if you look at the type of locations, we see the mega hubs, as Richard also mentioned before, which is partly driven by, or mainly driven, to be honest, by the e-tailers like the Amazons, Zalandos, and Redcoons of this world, where the location criteria before establishing a distribution center are a little bit different, driven by access, availability of land, availability of incentives, expansion possibilities, access to good labor, flexible labor, and a lot of labor, to be honest, because those tend to be the bigger sheds, most often above 50,000 square meters. And then there is, let's say, a second category, which tend to be more generic, if you look at it from an investment perspective, closer to population centers. They are more medium-sized in terms of layout, more generic, maybe a little more mezzanine space, but overall, it is the product we tend to like as an institutional investor.
My view, and this is my view, but my view is that in the future, it's going to be about collaboration. It's going to be about finding the right mix of customers to share the same facilities under the same contract in a non-competitive way. And the people who can do that are the people in this room. If you're in property or in property development, then you're going to have to move your game away from being a transactional operator into one where you're thinking about a service-based logic. Understanding your customers, understanding their supply chains in depth, and then making the right match between, let's say, an electronics retailer and a fashion retailer, getting them to enjoy the automation and the pick requirement that they're going to have to develop in order to service their customers.